Hello everybody, Shady here, and we are back with part 2 of my Final Fantasy Definitive Rankings. So obviously in today's video we are going to be going over number 20 to 11, the next 10 in the list. Obviously last time I went through the first lot, and yeah, so obviously one thing I want to address was a mistake I made in the first video. Kind of funny, I said from 30 to 29, obviously, which yeah, it wasn't 2 games, it was actually 10. Which is kind of dumb on my part, but anyway, let's just get into it. Obviously I've done an introduction and we've got 30 to 21 in the first list, and obviously now we're going to do 20 to 11, and obviously at number 20 is going to be Final Fantasy VII Revenant Wings. I'm not sure if a lot of people even know about this game in particular. This was a sequel to Final Fantasy XII, obviously, done for the DS. Yes, this one's really interesting. So it's set basically a year after the events of the first game, and obviously, as you can see, we're playing as Vaan and Penelo again. We reunite the whole gang from the first game, and what's really cool is obviously, you know, Final Fantasy XII was kind of this real-time type of game. Used the Gambit system as the first one to not have turn-based combat of the single-player games anyway. Obviously, 11 was first. But yeah, this one does really cool things. So it turns the game into like an RTS. You can probably see over there. Don't know if you can really see that. But yeah, it turns it into like this real-time strategy game, which is kind of cool, which yeah, no Final Fantasy game has done before. Obviously, I'm sure a lot of people know this, but Tactics and 12 are kind of in the same universe. Well, it's in the world of Yblis, so it's kind of a good meld between those two types of games. So yeah, you have Vaan and Penelo, basically have just kind of discovered this new kind of place. There's these people, kind of their city in the sky, and they basically help this guy, this kind of winged dude, to try to, you know, save the day pretty much. Don't want to spoil too much in the story, but yeah, it's a really cool, interesting game. I actually played this game like as soon as it came out. Yeah, and it's just one of them that I think it's worth your time. You know, if you like real-time strategy games, if you like Final Fantasy, I think you're gonna really enjoy this one. What's really cool though is basically each character kind of does like one type of attack from what I remember, and obviously it uses the touchscreen heavily, which is really cool because, you know, it works so well for a real-time game, having that touchscreen and everything. Yeah, it's actually a solid RTS, not just like just some sort of spin-off game. So yeah, really cool. Definitely worth a try. And obviously, number 19, we've actually got the original Final Fantasy. Yeah, so obviously, I'm sure everyone knows this, but yeah, Final Fantasy was kind of the, you know, Square Enix's last kind of attempt at trying to do something. You know, it was make or break for them. Thankfully, it was successful, so it, you know, spawned this huge franchise, which we're talking about now. You know, I'm doing a list of 30 of them that are, you know, a ranking, so obviously it was just successful. But yeah, essentially they wanted, you know, I think they want to do their take on something like Dragon Quest, and you know what, it holds up really well for a game that came out in '87. Yeah, so obviously in this game, playing as the 4 heroes of light, we basically have to choose their classes. You create a job composition. Typically I go for like warrior, thief, black mage and white mage. That's kind of what I go for, but you can kind of do your own mix. Then you're just going from town to town, doing little tasks, taking on dungeons, fighting bosses. Pretty straightforward little game, but works really well. And yeah, I think it's definitely worth your time. Like I said, still really good game for the time that it came out, you know. And obviously, next up, Final Fantasy III is number 18 on the list. Yeah, this is just a better version of the first game, really. Introduces the job system, the first game in the series to do that. Yeah, obviously, pretty much the same thing. We play as 4 heroes of light, have to save the day, go to the crystals. Each crystal will give you new jobs. This is the 3D remake. This was like the first version of the game we got outside of Japan. Obviously, we now have the Pixel Remaster, which is basically like the original game, but you know, with the more traditional kind of look to it. Really good game. Obviously, this one is kind of annoying because there's this, like, when you change jobs, there's this kind of period where you have to do some battles to adjust, like the adjustment period. The Pixel Remaster kind of removed that, so you may want to go for that one instead of this. But still a really solid game. Like I said, it's just a better version of the first game. So next up on the list, at number 17, we have Final Fantasy Tactics. So yeah, obviously, yeah, this is a strategy RPG. Like I said, it's set in the world of Ivalice, like with Final Fantasy 12. And so this game, I'm sure it's probably got a little bit of attention at the moment because the director of this game just did Unicorn Overload with Vanillaware. Yeah, he's a guy who really loves the strategy genre. And yeah, this is just a really good game, you know. I played this at a time when I wasn't big into strategy games, or it was like one of the first ones I played, so I kind of struggled a little bit. So for me, it was a tad hard, but still a really good game though. And I think it's definitely worth your time. Like I said, it's quite hardcore. So yeah, I think you need to kind of be a little bit into strategy games. And I don't know if I could suggest buying this at the moment because I have a feeling we're gonna get like a 2D HD version of this. You know, Tactics Ogre got one, for example, you know, and that's a lesser known game. So probably just hold out, they'll do a improved version. But if you're interested in playing this, obviously it was originally on PS1, then we got this like updated version of the game. And I think this is also ported to like mobile and Steam as well, so you can get that version if you prefer. Obviously, yeah, I think this version is a bit more expensive, this and like PS1 version. Yeah, what's really cool as well is, as you can see, it adds Balthier. You can actually get him as a playable character. And like in the original PS1 version, you have Cloud as a character you can unlock as well, which is kind of cool. That was like one of the best moments ever, knowing you know, recruiting Cloud. And he has all his like attacks like Omni Slash and the Limit Breaks as like special moves. Yeah, just a really cool game. Next up on the list, 16, we've got the Final Fantasy Tactics. This is a really cool game because this was essentially one of the first games to return to Nintendo after, you know, Final Fantasy VII left to PlayStation. They ended up doing Crystal Chronicles in this game, Crystal Chronicles for the DS, Crystal Chronicles for the GameCube, and then this was like for the Game Boy Advance. Yeah, this is a bit more of a kind of an easier version of Final Fantasy Tactics, you know, the advanced version. Definitely a lot more beginner friendly. I would suggest this for anyone who hasn't played strategy games before. There is a couple of nuances and stuff with this. There's this whole system with judges, and certain battles you're prohibited to use certain moves. So for example, there'll be ones like you can't do sword attacks or you can't do black magics. And if you do them, your character gets arrested. You get like a red card, and like in football, you get like yellows and reds. And you get taken to jail, and then you have to like pay to free them or let them serve their sentence. So yeah, a really funny little thing though, but awesome game. Yeah, just really solid. And yeah, it has all the jobs and all that sort of stuff like you would expect from Final Fantasy. You have all the different, you know, just like in 12, you have the different races and all that. And then I think there's certain specific classes will be able to use certain jobs as well. And yeah, just a really cool game. For like a GBA game, it's really good. This was also on the Wii U eShop. Obviously, you can't play that now, which is annoying. But yeah, you got this version. Obviously, GBA is so easy to emulate. You can just find a way to play it. Next up on the list, yeah, we've actually got Final Fantasy Tactics Advance 2. I don't know if anyone even remembers this, but yeah, they did a sequel for the DS. This is just a better version of Tactics. Yeah, just a great game, I think. Yeah, we've got a completely different protagonist. Oh, something I completely forgot to mention. So in this game, the story is that this boy, his brother's ill. Him and his friend, they bring this book over. They read it and it teleports into Ivalice, and pretty much the same thing with this game. Oh my god, this is like covered in dust. Yeah, it's just been like sat on my shelf. Yeah, pretty much the same sort of story. You've got this kid who is born to the world of Ivalice, and then you kind of have to like save the day. And yeah, I love the art style in this. You've got like the Garland looking guy there as well. Garland, sorry. Yeah, just awesome. And like I've said before, the DS was just amazing for JRPGs. Yeah, having the dual screen and all that was just awesome. And yeah, another thing, yeah, there's like tons of side quests and all sorts of amazing content in this game. And yeah, it's just, I think it's the best of the Tactics trilogy personally. I really hope we do get more Tactics games at some point. Like I said, I think we're going to start off with getting 2D HD of regular Tactics, so shouldn't be too long. Next up on the list, this is going to be an interesting one. So, Final Fantasy X-2. This one is basically, 1 second, sorry. I'm trying to do something here that doesn't want to work. Yeah, so obviously this game is essentially, this is or was the first sequel to any Final Fantasy game. Technically, I think there was some sort of OVA for Final Fantasy V, but we're not going to count that. This is basically Final Fantasy. Sorry, I'm kind of stumbling more with this. Basically, Square Enix, after the release of, I think it was Spirits Within, they like lost so much money. I think that like Sakaguchi spent like 100 million on that movie. It's basically like, the movie's essentially like Aliens, but with a Final Fantasy twist. Very weird movie, but they lost a lot of money and they kind of were looking at ways of recouping, so they decided, you know what, we'll kind of put together a sequel to Final Fantasy X. It was like hugely popular. I think it was like the most popular Final Fantasy game at the time. So yeah, it's not like, doesn't have the budget of like a full-blown game, but yeah, you know, the recognition of 10. And you know, it kind of did this thing where you basically play as Yuna there, Riku, and the new character Pain. It starts off with this thing where she's performing this pop song, and I think because of that, some people were put off thinking, oh, this is kind of too weeby for me or whatever. But no, it's actually a great game. I'm probably one of the few people who would have it this high on the list, obviously, but I really enjoyed it when I first played it. My first experience with this game was they basically did like a little preview prequel thing in the game Unlimited Saga, which is kind of this JRPG on the PS2. I could do a whole video just on that game alone. It's just this massive game. You basically it's just menus the game essentially. They'll just say that. You can look up a video on the game if you want. But yeah, that kind of a little teaser of the game where you just see Yuna, Riku. I can't remember if you see Pain in that or not. But yeah, that was the only way to get that until they did the HD version. But yeah, I'm going off on all sorts of random tangents now. But essentially in this game, we play as the 3 girls. They're called the Gull Wings. The game was perfectly described as like Charlie's Angels, the game, I suppose. You're basically doing these different jobs around Spira. So we play as the 3 girls, and essentially we're just going around. We get to we have access to all of Spira from basically the beginning. So we can go like in 10 near the end where you get the ship and you can select it in the menus. You go to these towns and you can explore and do all sorts of things. A load of cool mini games to do. It has this thing called the Dress Sphere system, which basically allows us to select different jobs, but you can change them on the fly in battles. So you have what's it called? So you have the dress fairs themselves, which are the jobs which you can change into. Then you have the dress grid, or I can't remember what it's called, but essentially you place the dress fairs on these grids, and then each one of the characters can have the same or different ones, and then you can switch them in battle. It's really cool. And what's awesome as well is that you kind of, you learn the abilities. You can kind of learn abilities through battle as well, which is kind of weird. You gain AP and experience. So it's kind of weird, like during the battle it will say you've learned the skill now and stuff, kind of an interesting thing. Also, this was kind of the first technically real-time game in a way. This kind of feels like an early version of 13's battle system, where you can just act once your ATB bar's full. So, you know, you could do an attack, you know, you select your ability, the ATB gauge will depend, the length of the gauge will depend on the attack, if that makes sense. So sometimes it could be a small one, sometimes it could be a large one, and then like multiple characters can attack at the same time. There's no actual waiting in turns, it's just how long it takes the gauge to fill for you to do your attack. Really solid game. So yeah, obviously it starts off with you just kind of doing odd jobs in the story. You see this sphere, and it looks like there's a character, well, it looks like Tidus in these kind of spheres that you see, but he looks like an evil person. And it doesn't look like it's in our time period. And then kind of the mystery begins from there. And then you're kind of doing little, you know, there's little missions. It kind of has that anime vibe where there's the long story chaining along, but you're doing kind of little adventures on the way. And it's a really solid game. And I think it's definitely worth trying. But yeah, anyway, next up on the list, yeah, so for me, number 13, where we're on now, is Final Fantasy V. yeah, this is obviously the Origins collection. This includes all the anthology. This includes 4 and 5. Yeah, this collection was different. So basically, this is a weird one. So in North America, the anthology collection was Final Fantasy IV and Chrono Trigger, but over here it was 4 and 5, and then I think 5 was released as separately in North America, and we just didn't get Chrono Trigger here on the PS1, even though that's not a great version, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, Final Fantasy V, this is a really interesting one because it's a game that has grown on me over the years. Like, I really wasn't a big fan of this back in the day, but as I've played it, the more times I've played it, it's kind of grown and grown on my list. And I feel like maybe in the future it'd be even higher, because, you know, I feel like I appreciate something more and more each time I play it. Yeah, so obviously we're playing as Bart. He's our main character. He meets this girl, Lena. He's just traveling on his chocobo. Then he sees this girl, Lena, who's getting attacked, saves her. And then there's also this other old guy called Galuf. They kind of team up. She's like, I need to go to the crystal. My dad went there and, you know, he's in danger. So then they go, and then the adventure kind of continues from there. And yeah, it's just a really good game. It has an amazing version of the job system. I still think it's the best version. What's really cool is you learn jobs, and then when you acquire new ones, you can equip them. But then you can take an ability from ones you've learned and combine it, so you can kind of have these like mixed versions of jobs. It's really cool, and not really had another version of this job system, unfortunately, but it's really cool. Also, I forgot to mention, obviously, the other character is Ferris, who's this like pirate that you meet as well. And yeah, it's just a really, you know, I think the story isn't as good as 4, in my opinion. It kind of felt like a step back in that regard, but gameplay-wise, it's amazing, and definitely worth a try. Obviously, yeah, just play the Pixel Remaster version, I would say, you know, with the boosters and all that stuff. Obviously, you know, if you want some extra content, pick up the GBA version. Yeah. Okay, so next up, number 12. I'm going to be kind of cheating because it's going to be Rebirth and Remake. I count these as one game, really, because it is a remake of a single game. And, you know, Rebirth basically continues on straight after Remake. But yeah, really interesting. So obviously, Final Fantasy VII got, you know, confirmed that it was having a remake, and then they confirmed that part, it was going to be done in parts. This first part is just the Midgard section, and then obviously after that they can announce it was going to be 3 games, and then this was basically from Calm to the Forgotten Continent, or whatever it was called. I think that was called. Yeah, and essentially, yeah, these two games are most of Disc 1. But yeah, really interesting game. Amazing battle system. For me personally, the best battle system of any of the non-turn-based games in the series. I think it's just, yeah, you know, there's some things I'm not a big fan of personally. I don't want to moan too much, but essentially it really feels like these 2 games just feel so padded out, in my opinion. You know, whoever decided to take Disc 1 and turn it into 2 games, I mean, most of Disc 1, it's not even all of Disc 1, I think was crazy. Really, I feel like this could have been a single game and it would have been so much better. But saying that, I really enjoyed my time with both of these games. Even with the story changes, some of them that I'm not a big fan of. I don't really want to go into that because obviously this game's still pretty new and I don't want to spoil things for people. That's not what I like to do. But yeah, both, you know, it just feels like, you know, they took a little bit of story, turned it into 2 games, which obviously was going to lead to padding. And it just feels like the game wants to constantly slow things down, make you do extra things. You know, like in Rebirth, they're constantly splitting the party up and making you do things through both perspectives, just to long things out, and it really slows the pace down. But besides that, it's still great. Like I said, the battle system is amazing. And in this game, what I really love is they just improved upon that battle system. And there's one really cool thing they do. So you'll have a town which will be part of a region. So for example, you're in Calm, where you start off. That's just like this huge big town, and then you have the Grasslands region, which you can then explore. So it's not a giant open world, but like these kind of sandbox zones, which I really like. And then you do little tasks within there. You'll fight monsters, you'll find these towers that you can approach. You'll find these crystals that give you materials and all sorts. You'll do this mini game that gives you a chocobo, which lets you, traverse the world easier. And yeah, it's just a lot of fun. I think just being able to see the world of 7 in these amazing graphics, and when you're in Calm for the first time, like for me anyway, seeing it as this big bustling town is just amazing. And it truly is the strength of the game. Like I said, I think you can have enjoyment even if you haven't played the games, but I feel like if you play the originals, that's really, it's going to be so much better for you. And if 7 is your favorite game, I think this would be a lot higher on your list. It's just, for me, 7 isn't my favorite Final Fantasy 7 game. Still love the game. But yeah, just an interesting game. Like I said, a little padded out, but still great overall. And yeah, I still would highly suggest those games, and they are still so high on my list, these are number 12 on my list there. I know some people can be annoyed that they count as 2, but stuff happens. But anyway, the last one on this list, number 11, is, believe it or not, Final Fantasy 16. Yeah. Believe it or not, I was so surprised by this game. First of all, obviously, just to make something clear, character action games are some of my favorite. Devil May Cry is my favorite series of all time, Bayonetta, Ninja Gaiden, all of them. So when I found out that they were turning this game into a character action game, for me anyway, not a lot of fans, there were certain fans who didn't really like that, but I was like, straight away, I was like, yeah, that sounds awesome, right up my alley. But then I was also like, how is this gonna work? How is it gonna feel like a fancy game? I was kind of a bit like, I wasn't too sure in that regard. But then when I played the game, it really manages to capture the spirit of what Final Fantasy is, I feel like. There's this great moment where, I don't want to spoil too much, but basically, you're on this boat, and you're kind of like escaping from this place, and there's this big cutscene and everything. I was like, this feels like a Final Fantasy game, and obviously it's called Final Fantasy, but what I mean is, it's just so awesome how they can modernize the series, and they're so willing to constantly reinvent themselves and do something different. And who would have thought playing Final Fantasy 1 that one day, the 16th entry will be like a full-on Devil May Cry God of War style character action game, and we'll pull it off and feel like an actual Final Fantasy game. But okay, let's talk about the story a little bit. So obviously in this game we play as Clive Rosenberg. Is it Rosenberg or Redfield? No, it is Rosenberg, isn't it? I mean, I played the game last year and I can't remember. But yeah, Redgrave? Well, Clive, we'll just say it's Clive. So yeah, he's essentially a prince of this kingdom, and he basically, we get this whole early section as him as a boy. We get to basically see that he has a younger brother who is kind of the one who's going to be the prince, or who's going to take the crown eventually, because he has the power of the Phoenix, which is an icon. Clive is unable to do that, so there's kind of a frosty relationship where his mother kind of hates him, but he's kind of taken up the he's decided to be like the sword or something for his brother. He's like the guardian of his younger brother, Joshua. And then basically what happens is they're going to do this kind of rite passage thing where the boy gains the power of the Phoenix, but then their kingdom is attacked, and you find out that the mother betrayed them. And then this other icon, Ifrit, comes from nowhere, kills the brother, and then Clive is taken by the villains and made to be a slave, and then he kind of has this tattoo on him. And then we kind of cut forward, and we see him at this campfire, about to go to battle, like 10 years or so later. I think he's 15 in the early bit, and then he's 25 here. And he basically has to fight alongside these guys in this army. Ends up, essentially, things happen. He fights the boss Shiva, who ends up being someone else, and then he kind of escapes with this, his childhood friend Jill is who it is. They both escape. They meet Sid, who then basically has created this kind of hidden place where no one will be a slave, and it kind of goes from there. And then you basically have to fight off, save the day pretty much. And yeah, like I said, it does such an amazing job at, you know, it has this really cool battle system, character action style battle system. But then obviously it's done with the Final Fantasy 14, and then we see Final Fantasy 14 team, sorry, so Yoshi P and all them lot. So then you have you kind of have like your rotation almost like in those games. You will, you know, you have these attacks that kind of are timer based, or cooldowns, attacks with cooldowns than your normal combos and stuff. And yeah, it's just a really fun battle system. Some of the things I didn't like, one, I felt like the early scenes with Joshua or with Clive and his brother, it was too short for my liking. So, I don't know, I felt like I needed that section to be longer so the ending would have hit harder for me personally. I'm not going to spoil the ending, like I said. And also, random encounters just felt pointless. It's kind of a good and a bad thing. So essentially with 16, the game really wants you to do all of the quests and everything, and then you gain experience and everything, and then everything feels very automated in that way. But you know what, the characters and everything, I really liked. I enjoyed every quest I did, all the little chains and everything. And yeah, I think overall it's a great game. But anyway, I've kept you guys long enough. That's obviously, you know, part 2 of the Final Fantasy Definitive Rankings. And obviously with the third part, we're gonna finally talk about the top 10, the games that I think are the best in the series, the cream of the crop. So thanks for tuning in, and hopefully I'll catch you next time, where we will, where you'll find out what my top 10 is. But anyway, guys, have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you in the next one.